record on this computer. That way I know where it's going. All right, everybody, here.
All right, so this is SIG API Machinery from August 16th. Well, I would go ahead and share my screen, but I actually have Mehdi, who wants to present to us about the client libraries. And there he is. All right, Mehdi, you.
Go ahead. Do you say anything there?
He basically invited you to go ahead and start your presentation.
Oh, okay. So I'm Mehdi. I'm working on OpenAPI and Kubernetes clients. We have new org actually called Kubernetes clients. What's the intention of this presentation is give you a status update on the org and what it's doing, and we'll get it from there. So Kubernetes API have nice features. It's REST, but it has some more features like watch, port forwarding and stuff like that. But the good thing is we have OpenAPI v2 there. Soon it should be v3. And what's OpenAPI for people that they don't know what that is? It's a machine readable interface for describing, producing, consuming, and visualizing RESTful API. It has definitions. For us, it's API objects. We have paths or operations. It does support authorization and authentication, and have extensions that we use for some of our things that we added in Kubernetes. We decided to go, at the early days, we decided to go with code generation for non-Go clients because having a Swagger or OpenAPI would be a very nice thing to use as an input to code generators. And code generation is very good because you can design the client, you can generate it, you can fix the stuff with it, and then on every release, you don't need people to add stuff to it or or maintain it. Basically, you will generate a new client for every release, and that's a nice feature. We have Swagger code gender that supports many languages, including Java, Python, Perl, PHP. We use AutoRest for C#. We decided that we need the approval from any other languages to use anything other than Swagger CodeGen. Swagger CodeGen is pre-approved for the org. And I said why we are using code generators. It's also less bugs. That means when you add things manually, there is also always a chance that you miss a prompt method, which have bad signature or stuff like that. So a generator will make sure that everything will be generated as intended. The structure that we decided to have clients is having one single generator repo. We call it Gen, Kubernetes clients/Gen. That has all code generator in it, and it's not actually it's not running in containers. It supports all of the languages that Swagger CodeGen supports. Then for each language, we'll have a base. That's basically the shared utilities that we need for the client who works with Kubernetes. These shared utilities are things like loading kubeconfig or supporting watch or supporting exec or any WebSockets. And then it's the official language repo that is basically auto-generated. In an ideal world, it will be completely auto-generated and only depends on the base work. And then with this design, a user can come with their own OpenAPI spec. This spec could be for a CRD or a custom API server or user API server. They have OpenAPI, they can just come and use the same thing that we use for the official language client to generate their own clients and have the same experience as we have in official clients. The way that the generation works is actually generating operation classes and definition classes based on the operation and classes as an API objects. It also will generate a REST client and configuration object. I call these two an O1 generation because there's only one of them. Operations and definitions are ON based on number of IP objects and operations you have. And then we add the supports for, these are manual supports for kube config loader, watch. We allowed actually REST client and configuration to be customized and be part of the utility, the base package. We are actually going forward discourage that. We try to actually fix things in Swagger CodeGen, so we don't need to patch anything in the generated code. We're, at least for Python client, we're very close to that. For Java client, we are not. We are very, very close to that, actually. We also have some badges for clients. Capability badges will tell you what it supports. Bronze means they can load kubeconfig, and they can run in cluster, but they don't support things like watch or exec. If they support watch, they are going to be silver. If they support exec attached for forwarding, proto encoding, and they generate examples, we call them gold. Even our first client, Python, is not gold yet. It needs proto.
Mehdi, I got a question on this page, actually. Something that's come up from the SIG CLI team is that they were looking at what it was going to take to actually run their kube control extensions. And the extensions, no matter what language they're written in, are most likely going to need to load a kube config file and be able to understand the different flags. So you know how we have flags that will override the values from a kube config file in our Go client. Is that included in bronze, or is that not included at any level today?
It's not included in any level today. Some of those flags are supported, but no, most of them are not included. We can look at them and add them to some support level here, some capability level here.
Sorry, you trailed off at the end there.
Oh, I can look at them and add them to some level in these capabilities here.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see an issue where we can talk about it and tag in SIG CLI because it came up a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Good question.
I will create the issue. Thanks. And also we have support levels. Alpha doesn't mean anything. Everything is alpha. Beta means you should at least have bronze requirements for the capabilities, and then you should have reasonable stable releases, instruction, and at least 2 honors. And stable beta plus documentation for each platform. Deprecation policies, release versioning should be documented clearly, and we should have some documented users. And we don't know what it is.
Do we not know what N is because nobody meets the stable?
Nobody meets the stable yet. So yeah, we don't know what it is.
Suggest we invent a number for N.
Yeah,
and
5.
I think 1 is adequate.
1, okay.
3.
1, really? No, I don't know that you have an API until you have 2. It's just a personal, like, is your framework a framework without 2 users?
Yeah, should be at least 2, yes. What do we have right now? We have a Python file that there's a
Alter.
Me.
Echo.
All right, we're going to try again.
Okay. So the current state is Python has 3 stable releases. It's pretty stable actually. Support watch, exec, attach, kubeconfig, most of the functionality of kubeconfig loader, and it actually have n documented users, and is more than I think at least 3. I know about 3 of them. Java is in development. It has one alpha release, the supports kubeconfig, and partially exec and watch. I would say partially because I didn't test them truly yet, but they are there. JavaScript is in startup development, need contributors. I'm working on that right now. The kubeconfig loader is in progress. TypeScript is in development. It supports kubeconfig loader. C# is also in development.
Can I ask why you have to do exec and attach to be gold? It seems like a lot of people could do a long ways with a client that does everything but those. And if you need to interactively do stuff, especially attach, like which seems like it's the hardest because it's streaming, then you could just follow that. You could just Python, execute shell out to run kubectl or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that a requirement? Or why not make that like platinum or whatever?
So it's actually interestingly not that hard to support exec. It wasn't that hard in Python.
We are moving it from Speedy to WebSockets. Clayton's been doing that work.
Because it's WebSockets. It's
Okay.
not. We are supporting WebSockets. We are not supporting SPDY. We are not supporting SPDY. So it's not that hard. And also the thing is that a client can be completely stable in a stable support level, but only be silver. Doesn't support exec or attach. But yeah, we can consider that if you think it should be.
This WebSockets, I guess, is not that hard.
Yeah, WebSockets. Yeah. So
I had a question about the JavaScript client. Is our Cube dashboard team going to be picking that up and actively using it? Or are they going to stick with whatever they have now?
I don't know that yet. Unless we have a working client, we can answer that. My plan is to have a working client and present it to people to see if they're.
Okay. Are you soliciting them to be contributors? It seems like they would have pretty valuable input.
I should definitely do that.
Okay.
So is Go gold and stable?
That's a good question. I don't think it's gold. Yes, it's gold. Does it have generated examples, Joe?
What's that?
Does Go client have generated examples? It doesn't. So it's not gold.
No.
No.
Yeah.
And it says stable, I guess. I guess in that part it's stable, but it's not.
Yeah, it's stable. It doesn't pick up new types. The generated Go client that we have today. Our generated Go client today is special in several ways. I don't know that it falls under these auspices particularly well.
There's not a lot of great user documentation on how to use the generated Go.
Even there's not a whole lot of good documentation on how to create the generated Go. And in addition, we have several pieces of our Go client that are actually hand rolled.
Yeah, I know Andy was working on doing an example of CDRs and generated Go clients and all that, but we'll get that out there at some point. But the documentation is sparse.
Yeah, I mean, it was missing some critical features until just this release around, can we actually use this to support the APIs that we have? So we just recently got, I think, most of the APIs using it. Anyway, I'm sorry, Mehdi. I just want to know about the JavaScript.
There is docs for the Go generator, but it's in a different repo. It's in the main repo.
Okay, so I included actually an example here to show people how easy it is, for example, in Python to use the client. To basically import things, load kubeconfig, it will load it in default location with all default names, and then you can just select this paths for all namespaces, or you can start watching on namespaces in a very simple way. Actually, this simplicity is because of this simplicity and not having a lot of dependencies. There are some people asking me why we don't generate Go client too. Can we generate Go with the same thing we generated these clients? And the answer is yes. Are we going to support it? The answer is no. We are not going to have two Go clients. But users can still go and generate the client using the same tools that we generate these.
Is this what Kelsey used in his PyCon demo using
Yes.
Google Home?
Yes. Kelsey used this. And
Demo.
he used this for the demo. He said that he spent the day on the whole demo. 10% of the time he spent it on this client to figure out things and make things work, and the rest of it was to figure out the APIs for Google Assistant.
That's the correct ratio. That's good to hear.
That's good to hear. Yes, that's really good to hear. He said that it was very easy to figure out things in the client because it was all named after the exact API calls we have everywhere else. So, and it's all about people. We are, I listed the people that are working on clients here. JavaScript definitely needs more people. We need to have actually 2 owners for each of them. We don't, even for Python. I'm the only owner. I have a lot of people helping there. I'm thankful to them, but none of them is signed up to be the owner. But if you guys are interested, definitely call me, on Slack or email or anything. For the contribution, I was thinking to have different teams in the org. We have a language-specific reviewers, language-specific approvers, and language-specific owners. Maybe the owners and approvers can be one team, but this is just a suggestion that I will put in a proposal, and we'll talk about that there. Again, if you're interested, please ping me or contact SIG API Machinery, or just look around the org and pick up issue and start working on it. Anyway, that was it.
I was muted. Thanks, Mehdi.
Sure.
All right. Are there any other questions for Mehdi? I'm assuming no, because this is a pretty outspoken group. All right. I'm going to go ahead and throw the agenda back up here. See. And there, hopefully you're seeing it again. And so let's see, we already talked about the behavior of the aggregator. And I went ahead and filled in, I think, where we ended, a separate condition and then some way to indicate on the API service you really expect it to be there. The next thing I want to talk about is how we're handling moving some of our pieces into staging. We have successfully completed step 1, where we move the actual code into staging. It gets vendored, the dependencies are snipped, and we start enforcing cycle checks. And that's all things that anyone can do. Well, anyone, but anyone with sufficient cred and merge rights and finding the right reviewers can do all those bits. There's a part 2 to moving something into a staging repo. And that involves actually updating the Munger bot that we have in test infra to do the cloning steps, right? Because as you know, we push our changes out from Kubernetes to Kubernetes API Machinery and to Kubernetes Client Go and all the others. We've been having some trouble getting those pulls merged, right? So we Red Hat, Stefan in particular, and is familiar with the tool because we helped Chow in the initial reviews for writing that piece of the Munger bot. But we need help getting the actual pulls themselves merged and that Munger bot active. We want, in 1.7, we started creating branches. We have a pull to create 1.7 branches for people to be able to find their dependencies when they try to vendor pieces. There's a pull open to do that. It's been lingering for a while. And then we have a pull for cloning K8s.io metrics. I believe that one also moved in 1.7. And so they've been sitting out there for quite some time. I'd really like to get some attention on it. I was gonna ask, we can do the reviews, but we don't own the test infra tool. And Chow has helped in the past. I was going to ask for help from Chow to push these.
So I poked the RMMH last Thursday. He says he's working on it. And I think it will make this process faster if people can test it themselves and then poke RMMH on me to deploy it. I had a doc checked in like 1 month ago. It documented how to test these staging repos under your own organization. I think that might be helpful. And I think in the long term, we somehow need to open the permission of these merge bots to non-Googlers. I mean, otherwise it will always be a bottleneck.
Yeah, I think that too. You know, we're willing to open polls in there. We're certainly willing to help do the reviews. We helped with the initial review to get this stuff in, but we don't have the actual rights to do that final merge bit. So in this case, if you could link in the how to test directions, we'll give them a try. But these ones that have lingered and the ones that we have open now, right? We have open now polls set up for.
I'll give RMMH a little longer time this week, and I can personally do these things next week. Probably.
Okay, that would work well. And yeah, if you could either in this doc or in the poll or both link in the link to your directions for testing locally. Because neither Stefan nor myself were aware that there was an easy way to test it locally without actually building an entire little CI platform.
It's not easy.
Okay, hopefully it's not overly difficult.
And I'll follow up on the question of how and when we can open up more of the permissions to the test infra repo and the bots and that aspect. Okay,
because I understand that if you want to keep it tightly controlled, that's okay. We just need a little bit more responsive.
It's not actually that at all. It's more that just everyone has other day jobs and nobody really pays attention to it. So
yeah, I think it's a little different. If we had been there saying, "Hey, we need a poll that does this," as opposed to having the poll and saying, like, "Hey, this does this. Let's get this in."
Fully understand. Totally.
So, you know, on a similar note, we have a new staging repo. We initially called it KubeGen, but after some discussion on the message board, Walter suggested code generator, and that sounded fine. So we're going to have Kubernetes code generator, and I've linked in polls here. The generator contains the generators that we use for our API types. So it contains generators for deep copy and conversion and defaulting and clients, so that if someone wants to be able to build a kube-like API for something like, say, an aggregated API server, there will be a place where they are going to be able to vendor or pull the generators without actually having to vendor all of Kube. So Stefan has gone through, he's sniffed the links, made the staging repo, and he's got a pull open to rename it to meet the name that we agreed on, and then pulls open. Again, there's some secret Google sauce that needs to be done. For two of them, they're linked in here, and don't you worry, I will bug people again next week about trying to get these reviewed and merged, because it would be very helpful.
I will start investigating and see what secret sauce we need to apply to get this to happen.
Okay. One that I'm worried about in particular is that pull number 77. That one has been a challenge in the past on other staging repos. The only person I knew of that had the secret sauce was Tim Hawken. And nothing against him, but he's a hard guy to get hold of. So
slightly easier for us.
Okay. But so I think you'd be very happy to have somebody else able to maintain it, and linked here, and I'll be bugging people as we go
actually, on. Team commented on there, and Jeff will take care of it. I think for me, Jeff took care of it.
Ixty. Jeff Ixty?
Yes, Griffin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So that's it for the code generator. Over the next couple releases, we're going to be trying to remove cubisms. You know, right now, some of the generators actually hard code cube names. We'll be trying to fix those, pull them out of defaults, make cube vendor, pretend that a vendor's these in, and interact with them via a shell script like everyone else would. So that'll be ongoing work.
Right. So next item for the initializer. So I have a few outstanding issues related to the initializer, pushing initializer to beta. The first one is I want to change the API to support to make the initializers partially ordered, because if all the initializers are running in serial, it will take too long time. I think Eric also has something to say on this one.
Are there performance numbers comparing a cluster with no initializers versus a cluster with several initializers? Even in the case when the initializers are as responsive as possible, what does that do to the latency for a request, assuming the client is not timeout?
So I don't have a direct number, but we can do an educated guess, because all the initializer controller needs to watch for the objects, and a watch latency can be as long as several seconds, and then the initializer controller needs to update the object, and that will take several hundred of microseconds, so milliseconds.
Do you think it should be a beta requirement to have firm non-estimated measurements of this?
So that's actually listed inside of Wojtek's SLI or SLA, SLO proposal that I believe merged today. He has split the metrics apart for API Machinery to be able to do lists and API responsiveness without initializers, and then API responsiveness with initializers. He has goals for without initializers. I don't believe that he listed goals for with initializers. Step one was to measure what we had.
He probably wants them, but he wants to, if I had to guess, he probably thinks he should measure first and then try and figure out what's achievable.
Yes, I mean, it's not that there will never be goals. It's that right now it's virgin territory.
Well, we agree to like having a pod create like now takes 1 second. If it went to 30 seconds with several initializers, that we would be unsatisfied with that performance.
I think we would want to know why it took that long to see if there was.
Say like, hell no, we're not going to ship that to our users and make things that took 1 second take 30 seconds now.
Sorry, you're a little hard to hear, Eric. I see this as a configuration thing, right? I mean, I want it to be as fast as possible, but ultimately, if a cluster admin decides that he wants to have an initializer and that initializer happens to be slow, I think it's important for us to say that it's slow. We should be able to describe why it is slow.
To be clear, we're talking about measuring the performance of as fast as an initializer we can write. So if the guy writes a really fast initializer that's basically all it does is set one field and responds immediately, that has to be fast. It has to be possible for people to install several initializers that are well written and for it to be fast.
Yeah, I think there's a way that latencies stack, right? That can end up with a real problem if you have a series of even perfect initializers, right? If the tail is slow enough, that could be a problem. And I have a feeling that's what Wojtek wants to look at.
I completely agree with David. If someone wants to write a slow thing and that makes a slow initializer and that makes the cluster slow, we should definitely let them do that.
Yeah.
But it should be possible for them to use several initializers and for it to not be slow.
I would agree with that, but I'm not even sure I would go with the relative argument. I would say at some point there is a level at which it is just unacceptable if, in the ideal situation, the initializer takes, as you said, 30 seconds, right?
Oh, wait,
I don't care if it goes from 1 to 30. Or,
no, the initializer is going to take 0. I don't want the total request to take 30 seconds. Yeah. And if it goes back and forth enough times, maybe it does. I don't know.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and I think channel David's point, which is that if you have an initializer which makes the whole thing secure and it takes 30 seconds and that's what I care about, then that should be fine.
No, but again, there's a difference between your initializer and the framework around the initializer, which is, I think, the point Eric's making. If the framework around the user's initializer adds 30 seconds, no matter how simple their initializer is, that's basically unacceptable.
Yeah, so I'm in favor of measuring that. I'm in favor of looking to see where the fat is. I'm in favor of looking to see where those are. Since it's built on top of the APIs that we already host, I don't anticipate we're going to get any major surprises, right? As Chao was saying, to write an initializer, you essentially have a watch and you have a patch, and then the etcd watch has to conclude, and then the response is sent, right? So the overall flow is known. It is not a new flow. It is just using APIs that we already had and already existed. So
it sounds like the actions are to measure that.
Yes.
It sounds like the expectation is that it's several seconds plus several hundreds of milliseconds.
Yes.
And
yes.
So a reasonable starting point for Wojciech might be no more than some percentage of overhead for the no-op initializer.
Yeah, I mean, his step one is to measure it. I don't want to promise Wojciech to a particular number, right? I would like to see what it is.
Yeah, I would say the SLO also needs to take into account external webhooks. Something that only looks at initializers is probably not as useful as the external webhooks.
I don't remember if he specifically called that out. We can check.
Yeah.
Initializers were one that I asked for. I bet Daniel probably asked for webhook.
Right. So Clayton, you're talking about an overall SLO, but like clearly, if we measure initializers without webhooks and we see that it's a lot slower, then there has to be some back to the drawing board on the API.
Sure, but that also applies to external webhooks too.
Those are worse because they have to be sequential. Is that right?
No, external. So there's two types. There's mutating and non-mutating. Mutating are done in parallel, but that's subject to increased failure rate due to independent calls. And then the sequential part, there's in theory, mutating webhooks should be faster than initializers, and so, but in practice, like the infrastructure there also has some of the same challenges. Mutating emission webhooks are what initializers want to be when they grow up, except they're not observable from the outside of the system, which is, they're just two different design points on the spectrum.
You should write that down in some documents.
Yeah, is there a doc that explains all these options?
The initializers proposal, I think, doesn't have that clever twist on it, but it does call
It
out.
describes the end goal, even if it doesn't have clever phrasing.
Yeah, I spent some time with Kelsey coming up with clever ways to talk about this, but I don't think they're.
Do we know how many initializers and/or webhooks we think a typical user might have?
I mean, OpenShift has 44 admission webhooks across 20 resources or so. And I've seen evidence that people are looking at least 3 to 4 initializers per resource. Pods are going to be the big ones. Like people who come up with legitimate use cases where it's like, initial resources autosizer, or pod presets, and a few others. And then I expect mutating webhooks, or webhooks in general, people are going to want to compose those under existing engines. So like the OPA policy engine is a good example of, that's going to be kind of like a long tail for webhooks. That's the dual to, if initializers are easy to write, someone writing something that makes it easy to write an external webhook but represent it, have one space to answer it. So it's still 5 to 10 tops for webhooks.
When you say webhooks,
and some resources are a lot busier than others.
Yeah.
When you say webhooks, do you mean like authorization webhook and image policy webhook, or do you mean some other new thing that I don't know about?
External webhooks is the name that we use for the generic mechanism for making an admission call outside of the system as a synchronous call. So image and authorization are specific types of generic webhooks that, if re-implemented today, are just another variant, or are specific versions of the generic one.
Got it. So like maybe 4. I like that number 4 as a goal to have low latency on.
Yeah, for non-mutating webhooks and 4 initializers for pods is a reasonable estimate.
Okay. And
I think that's good.
If we only have 4 initializers, do you see we need the enforcing the partial ordering among initializers?
I don't know that I would say it's the first thing I would do. I mean, certainly it's going to be worse for the system if 2 people try to write at the same time and they get conflicts. So you're just adding more CPU load to the system if you don't obey a strict order.
Yeah.
We should suggest the initializer controller to use patch, then they won't have conflict.
Patch is almost as expensive as put is, unfortunately.
Yeah, but the chances of collision are less.
Unless they're colliding on the same fields, which...
If they're colliding on the same fields, then they're going to have a partial ordering.
The current API is not optimized to allow us to have patch and parallelism if we decide we need it. So I guess you could, if you want to, you could change the API now to optimize for parallelism as a couch, or you can wait until you see what the performance numbers are.
Yeah, if pods are going to be the thing that are chained, the biggest problem with pods is that stupid things that try to create 10,000 of them and then don't even look at the fact that they're failing all over is still more of a problem today than I suspect the additional latency from this would be. Like, I've never heard someone say, oh my gosh, my 10,000 pods didn't start at 5 seconds in a serious vein.
They will. They will.
Well, they will, but they're not saying it today. And the things they're saying today are, hi, my whole system falls over when this one small thing that the replication controller didn't expect happens. So I just, like, from a prioritization perspective, partial ordering doesn't seem as relevant to me as getting the core fundamentals sound so you can walk away from a system and it doesn't blow up behind you.
Well, I was going to use it if it's super slow, so let's measure that.
Yes, I'll do the measurement. The second topic is, shall we, there's a PR moving a certain admission controller from being an admission controller plugin to be an initialization controller. And the question is, shall we keep initialization controller with our regular controllers in the Kube controller manager binary?
Yeah, in this case, I think it was actually the cloud controller manager. And I think that one's slightly easier to see, right? You have a cloud controller manager. The cloud controller manager requires that particular labels are set in order to do the work that it needs to do. And so it made sense to bundle the initializer into that process. I don't object to having it separately, if someone feels really strongly, but that seems like if you want one, you want the other. So why would we make 2 things?
The set of events that you initializers need and the set of events that all the other controllers use disjoint. So is there any reason it can't be in the same process, but not use a shared informer, just have a separate client?
Oh, yeah, that's the way it's implemented right now, right? The poll is using a separate lister watcher to back a separate informer that that has uninitialized resources.
So it's not a strong need so far to put support for uninitialized resources into shared informers.
There's a different need for that, and that's the one that Chow has brought up a couple times, actually, where a replication controller tries to spin up a bunch of pods and then doesn't see that there are a bunch of uninitialized pods that match its label selector, and so it tries to spin up a bunch more.
I'm familiar with that issue and have a different view on its solution, which I'll hope to share soon.
So that's actually the third topic. So an alternative to fix the replication controller is to just add a garbage collector that will garbage collect slow to initialize objects. So replication controller will keep creating more pods, but there will be a garbage collector to remove those uninitialized pods.
Yeah, if we're going to define a max time, it seems like doing that as a general statement fits much more naturally than doing it as a specific per controller affordance.
Yeah.
So, it does mean that the failure mode of a cluster that starts to slow down is instead of eventually getting the work done, it starts doing zero work, which does seem to worry me. That worries me a little bit. Like, part of the nice things about the controller model is that things can go for quite a long time and then eventually reconcile. And the moment we introduce timeouts on initializers, we end up,
you can end up thrashing because you created
thrash
it.
Instead of,
Yeah.
Well, well-behaved controllers need to back off when they get any kind of error. And whether you get an error because of initializer timeout or another reason, you should back off.
Yeah, our controllers are very bad at back pressure today for anything other than a few very narrowly calculated things, and we have to fix that straight up.
Yeah, I want the workloads or the SIG apps to take on the job of making sure that we back off for any kind of error in the controllers as a best practice. Additionally, people will write bad stuff, so probably rate limits in the server side. And then initializers is a sub case of those two things we have to do.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I would be hesitant to say you were too slow, I'm going to delete you.
So it's surprising to me if I do an HTTP request and I get a non-200 response code back and yet an object was created. Might be a hard to find object, but it's still weird that you created the object. And so.
Yeah. And we went back and forth on this on the get. The concern was we could always move the get behavior for initialized resources to something that's a 200 error code that is still not too, the discussion was it should be 201 accepted. It's weird because what we're trying to do is avoid breaking old clients. And the problem is that old clients were broken because they were like, this should take place instantly. And that's not true. And so that is a part of it. I think it's reasonable to say that maybe we should just be a little bit less aggressive around get for uninitialized resources in our client tools.
So when you say it should take place initially, do you mean, so there's two, so if you give a 201 back and the person gets it, I agree that doesn't make sense, but if you just have the 200, have it hang until it gets a 200, then get can work immediately, and you're good.
Right, and that's already supported on Create today. You then make a subsequent get, and today we tell you it's not found because it's not initialized, but we could optionally make it, the goal here is we have to be backwards compatible with clients, and that's the primary design factor. And the unfortunate thing is there's no way to be backwards compatible with clients that is going to be perfect. So forget the initial alpha erred on the side of pretend it's not there. But we could tell you it's there, but then say, you have to deal with this slightly differently because of some characteristic. You certainly won't be able to mutate it, and that was some of the worry.
I think given time, I'm going to say that this bit in particular definitely deserves to get taken to the mailing list. What we do about this, because it's not obvious to me that I would want to just go delete these, but I do understand we need to do something there. So
I want to add that if we say the initializer controller may live with some regular controller in the future, then we definitely need to refactor our shared informers to support both. And if we are doing that anyway, then we can use the shared informer to fix our existing controllers. We don't need garbage collection.
I'll raise another point is we're actually very bad at tolerating latency in general. And so there is a bigger structural problem, not just back off, but we race on latency in quite a few cases. We need to get better at that.
We have to give people the option to write things that are synchronous and sequential, and have a better chance of getting right, even if it means adding some latency.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you can optimize by having things that return soon.
All right. So one other thing I just want to call out so people know, and then I think we're going to call it for today, is that the paging design is open. There's a community poll. Hasn't been a whole lot of comments in there. I suspect it just hasn't been called out. So that's one that I saw something on the mailing list about it today. It's worth going through and looking, especially if you have paging experience. All right. And Sally, I see you had something there. Go ahead and send something to the mailing list for that too, and we can see how far we get.
All right, I'll do.
Right. And I'll move you to the front if it's not settled in 2 weeks.
So quick question on ClientGo. This is Mayank. I'm attending this for the first time. Is ClientGo moving to a different repo? Should we be vendoring a different repo or?
No, ClientGo is going to stay where it is. It has Semver branches, and it will stay there. The presentation was about other client libraries, non-Go ones in particular.
Okay, because I saw Kubernetes client org has a Go folder as well, so a repo as well. So I was thinking
So
maybe
we may eventually move it there, but
okay.
GitHub will always keep the old, redirecting the old URLs. So nothing will break even if we move it there. But eventually we just move it there, as a new.
And is this the right forum for CRD, TPR kind of questions as well, or this is there is separate SIG for that?
We do own custom resource definitions. I'm sorry I didn't notice anything on the schedule about it. But if you have questions, the Slack channel or the mailing list are both good spots to do it. And myself, I'm Deads2K, and then Anthony from Google, NSOC, right? Was also involved in working on it, and so is Stefan Stitz. So if you have strategic questions, this call would be the place to do that. And then if you have tactical questions, Slack or the mailing list.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll post there then.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.